911, what is your emergency?
Hello? Hello, emergency. The bathroom. She's in the bed. Come on, she's in the bed, come on. Okay. I can barely understand. No, I don't know what she was saying to you. I don't know when she went to the bathroom or when I went there. It was trouble. And honestly, I don't know, man, she's not breathing. I mean, just give it back, man. Come on, son. That's all I do right now, man. I don't know. I just smoke right here.
Let's look out for the address on it so we can get her some mail. Okay. Okay, so something with the address on it so we can get her mail. Sir, I need the address so I can get her mail.
Listen, I'm right. I don't know, it's just to be outside with the dominant scammer. I don't care. She was here. She just went to the apartment with me. She was here. She's a sister of mine.
Okay.
I know, man. She's not breathing, man. She's not breathing. She's gonna die. She's not breathing, man. Come on, man.
What apartment are you in? Sir, tell me what apartment are you in?
Okay, just come on, Bobby, please stand up like she's gonna die, man. Come on, she's gonna die.
So I'm gonna send you some help, okay? Stay with me. I'm gonna send you help, okay?
That call came in at 3:30 a.m. on September 20th, 2015. Fidel Lopez stood over Maria Nemeth in their Sunrise, Florida apartment, begging for help. But when officers arrived, they didn't just find an unresponsive victim. They discovered a scene so violent, so brutal, it left seasoned detectives reeling. Maria, age 31, a beloved leasing agent with a gentle smile. Fidel, 24, her partner, and soon, her murderer. That night began with tequila and intimacy. But when Maria uttered her ex-husband's name not once, but twice, Fidel's reaction became unimaginable. He tore through their apartment, shattering the sliding glass door, punching holes in the drywall. Investigators later found blood spatters across walls, torn closet doors, and chunks of tissue scattered on the floor. Inside the closet, a devastated body. And in the interrogation room, Fidel confessed, he lost control. He admitted inserting objects into Maria's body. He said he became a monster. He pulled out intestines with his bare hand. In that terrifying moment, a loving partner became a killer. This was no accident. It wasn't a coincidence. This was a calculated eruption of violence that shattered a life, and a community. Stay with us. What comes next will shock you. Today on Bruised Voice, we tell the full story, step by step, from the melee in that closet to the sentence behind bars. Before we continue, if you're new here, like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Tell us in the comments below where you're watching from. You're now part of our community. Maria Nemeth, 31 years old, worked as a leasing agent at the Colonnade apartment complex in Sunrise, Florida. Neighbors remember her as gentle and kind, always wearing a welcoming smile as she showed units or chatted in the lobby. She had lived at the complex for years, earning a reputation as dependable and soft-spoken. Long after her shift ended, co-workers and residents said Maria was still there, answering calls, resolving problems, always patient. On the evening of September 19, 2015, Maria and her boyfriend, Fidel Lopez, returned to her apartment after a shared shift. Fidel, 24 at the time, had only recently moved in alongside her. Neighbors recall hearing arguments through the night, drinking and raised voices, but no one expected the violence that followed. Fidel was described as reserved, quiet enough to blend into the background. Yet in private, he held a fierce jealousy. He brushed off questions about children from past relationships. In family interviews, he was called a loving son, but even his own mother apologized to Maria's parents after the crime. Friends say their relationship was loving, until jealousy began to surface. Their fights were rare, but intense. Just before dawn on September 20th, 2015, Maria would wake to horror. That morning, Fidel made the emergency call. He would later admit stumbling upon her in the bathroom, naked on the tiled floor, surrounded by blood and bodily tissue. A woman devoted to her job, admired by those around her. A man who, outwardly calm, concealed a potent volatility. Together, they were a couple whose normal life ended in one of the most brutal acts in recent memory. In the next section, we'll uncover exactly how their night turned beyond repair. Maria Nemeth was 31 years old and worked as a leasing agent at the Colonnade apartment complex in Sunrise, Florida. Those who knew her describe a calm presence, always with a caring tone as she welcomed new tenants, guided leases, and patiently fielded phone calls for maintenance and inquiries. During her shifts, colleagues remember her kindness. Maria would stay late to comfort a distressed resident or lend a hand with paperwork. She was respected, and loved, for her gentle demeanor and reliability. Outside of work, she led a quiet life. She lived alone until her boyfriend, Fidel Lopez, moved in around early September 2015. Fidel was 24 at the time, just a few years younger. His presence in her life came with signs of affection and tension. Neighbors reported hearing voices late in the evening. On at least one occasion, they heard raised voices and heavy footsteps. No complaints were filed, no red flags obvious to passers-by. In public, Fidel appeared polite and unassuming. But according to law enforcement reports, a darker reaction stirred within him behind closed doors. His own family described him as a loving son, but conceded that he carried a fierce protectiveness over Maria, a trait that would soon turn cruel. On the night of September 19th, Maria and Fidel returned home after sharing a bottle of 1800 tequila. Neighbors later said they noticed heightened tension, but in that moment, only the couple was aware that normal had slipped away. That calm facade held memories, conversations, trust, and warmth. Elements that would be shattered within hours. Maria was remembered as a figure of patience and humility. Family members recalled her reflection in their lives as a source of light and hope. At her sentencing, her uncle told the judge she embodied effort, perseverance, and love of humanity. Fidel, meanwhile, described a tipping point. He said he became a monster, words that carried chilling weight when the truth emerged. He told detectives a single phrase, that of her ex-husband's name, ignited his explosion of rage. By the time rescue arrived in the early hours of September 20th, the life was lost, a community was shaken, and the first public statements were being released, releasing fragments of a story that would shock a region. Here was a caring woman, devoted to her work and those around her. Here was a man, quiet and dutiful, until jealousy erupted with unimaginable violence. Over the next chapter, we'll walk through how a simple apartment became the center of a crime that no one in Sunrise, Florida could forget. Late on September 19, 2015, Maria and Fidel sat on the hardwood floor of her Sunrise apartment, sharing shots of 1800 Reposado tequila. At first, laughter filled the room. But soon, drinks gave way to tense murmurs. Neighbors heard raising voices, faint at first, then louder. One resident reported the sound of rapid footsteps and banging furniture. This disturbance lasted nearly 2 hours, leaving no doubt something was amiss. Despite appearances, that evening was far from ordinary. Fidel's mood had shifted, his tone sharpened, his expressions tightened. Observers later noted a simmering tension, though still concealed from most. Around 3:30 a.m., the pair retreated into the walk-in closet. Fidel later revealed that during intimacy, Maria spoke her ex-husband's name, not once, but twice. The words triggered an eruption of violence unlike anything he'd ever admitted. Out came glass. The patio's sliding door shattered. Walls were pummeled, drywall cracked. The closet door snapped off and collided with the hallway floor. Their apartment looked like a battlefield. Fidel returned to find Maria lying unconscious on the closet floor. According to his later statement, blood coated her skin. He admitted to inserting multiple objects, glass, metal, a flat iron, into her body. He said he used his hand, up to the elbow, ripping out internal tissue, including sections of her intestines. When officers later reviewed his confession, they heard the words he used: he became a monster. He carried Maria from the closet into the bathroom, splashing water over her face in a frantic attempt to revive her. She remained motionless. Then, bending over the sink, he calmly washed blood from his hands. Leaving her there, he walked outside. A cigarette between his fingers, he stood quietly on the patio. Only upon returning, seeing her lifeless on the tile, did panic set in. That's when he phoned 911, reporting that she wasn't breathing and seemed to be dying. Officers arrived to find Maria naked, face down on the bathroom floor, her body surrounded by crimson pools. Walls, hallway ceilings, closet floor, spattered with chunks of flesh. The closet gutters were soaked in blood and tissue. Initial claims described rough sex gone wrong. Maria fainted, then he found her unresponsive. But the crime scene told a different story. Holes in drywall, a missing closet door, shattered glass, evidence of combative action and intentional violence. Taken to the police station later that morning, Fidel's account shifted. He admitted to full disembowelment, inserting foreign objects, smashing through the apartment, and attempting a cleanup. In that interrogation room, hours of questioning led him to repeat the same phrase. She said the other man's name, twice. I lost control. His words corroborated with crime scene photographs, and the pieces fell into place. This was intentional horror, not a tragic mistake. But detectives still had questions. Was this one act of rage, or part of something darker? In the next act, the investigation would reveal just how far this night's terror had reached. Shortly after the chilling 911 call, Sunrise police entered the apartment. In the bathroom, they discovered Fidel Lopez, sobbing, panicked, beside Maria Nemeth's lifeless, blood-slick body. Every inch of her was drenched in red. The apartment bore the scars of violence. Blood-soaked walls, scraps of tissue strewn down the hallway. Drywall ripped open with jagged holes. The closet door lay shattered on the floor. The sliding glass door beyond the living area was smashed into fragments. Detectives began questioning Lopez at the scene. He initially described the incident as a sudden collapse. Rough sex during which Maria passed out. He claimed she wasn't breathing, prompting his panicked emergency call. But crime scene details contradicted that version. The level of destruction, walls punched, glass shattered, closet ripped apart, spoke of something more. Police replayed interrogation footage where nuggets of truth forced Lopez to shift his story. For hours, investigators pressed him, refusing to accept an accidental explanation. They reminded him that this was no misfortune, it looked like a slaughter. They said, Fidel, this was not a case of rough sex. He responded, I'm doing the right thing. I loved her. She's a good girl. Then, he cracked. He admitted that during the intimacy in the closet, Maria said her ex-husband's name, twice. He said that awakened something in him. He conceded breaking the closet door, smashing the sliding glass door, punching walls. Investigators confirmed every detail from crime scene photographs. At one point, he lowered his voice and said, I became a monster. Even his own words reflected the transformation police saw in the blood and debris around them. He then confessed to inserting multiple household objects into Maria's body, beer bottle, flat iron, and ultimately his own arm up to the elbow. He described pulling out chunks of tissue and intestines. Detectives would later find those very materials in the closet and bathroom. Afterward, he carried her into the bathroom, attempted to revive her by splashing cold water on her face. She remained unconscious. He washed blood from his hands in the sink, stepped outside to smoke, then returned. Only then did he make the emergency call. Forensics teams combed through the closet and bathroom. They recovered pieces of tissue and bodily matter matching Maria's DNA. Blood spatter analysis affirmed the account of brutal violence. This was not a tragic accident, it was a calculated act of rage. Inside the interrogation room, Lopez reiterated, she called the other guy's name. That set me off. He tried to pause, eyes downcast, but continued, I'm not thinking. I wasn't thinking. Investigators watched footage of the destroyed closet and broken walls, and saw how the evidence and his own confession fit together. The mountain of evidence made it impossible to call this anything but murder, confession, crime scene destruction, forensic proof. The brutality went well beyond jealousy, it was an act of fierce, violent intent. As detectives pieced the fragments of that night together, one conclusion became clear, this death was no accident. What remains unknown is how, and why, it escalated to such a savage end. By dawn on September 20, 2015, officers led Fidel Lopez away in handcuffs. He faced charges of first-degree murder and sexual battery, their severity matched only by the brutality of his actions. In the courtroom hearing, prosecutors painted a stark scene. Fidel confessed he had torn through Maria's apartment, mutilated her body, and then called 911 as if she were suddenly unresponsive. They argued this was not a tragic accident, it was a brutal execution triggered by jealousy. In February 2017, attorneys debated whether his confession and crime scene images were too graphic for a jury. Defense counsel argued these should be suppressed, citing the emotional impact. The judge, Judge Alona Holmes, disagreed. She ruled the confession would be allowed at trial. Just weeks later, trial preparations reached a critical point. Prosecutors sought the death penalty. Defense attorneys argued Fidel wasn't fully aware of his rights, saying his English wasn't fluent. But the 911 call and interrogation, conducted in English, stood as proof otherwise. Facing mounting evidence and the possibility of a death sentence, Fidel changed course. In August 2017, he entered a guilty plea to first-degree murder and sexual battery. The goal? Spare himself execution. The prosecution and defense reached a plea deal, life in prison, no chance of parole, no appeal. On August 3, 2017, the deal was formalized. Fidel would spend the rest of his life behind bars. In court that day, Maria's uncle delivered an emotional address on behalf of the family. Only God can decide his fate, he said. Then it was Fidel's turn. His voice cracked as he begged forgiveness. He thanked the judge for sparing him the death penalty. Judge Holmes then spoke. "You are going to die in prison," she told him. Her words left no room for mercy. From that moment on, he would live, and die, inside prison walls. With the plea deal accepted, there would be no trial, no appeals. The sentence stood firm: life without release. Maria's death, triggered by jealousy and rage, would be finalized in court, her killer locked away permanently. Since August 2017, Fidel Lopez has been locked away in a Florida state prison. The court ensured his sentence: life without parole, no option for appeal. Neighbors who once described Maria as sweet, kind, and gentle could hardly reconcile their memories with the brutal death she suffered. "People drink," one said, "but there is no excuse for that." Media outlets called this one of the most brutal domestic killings in recent memory. Reports highlighted how jealousy, fueled by alcohol and rage, erupted into a carnage that stunned the community. Residents of the Colonnade apartments remain haunted by the events. Some now live with the lingering sense of what took place behind closed doors. Journalists pressed for answers. How could a loving relationship devolve so completely? Family members, too, offered their pain. Maria's uncle, speaking at sentencing, asked for justice. He called on others to remember who she was. A woman who gave comfort, hope, and kindness to those she met. Psychologists studying the case pointed to three key forces: alcohol, jealousy, and rage. Studies show that heavy drinking can amplify aggressive behavior, especially in individuals with strong jealous tendencies. In domestic violence research, similar cases follow a pattern: a partner senses perceived betrayal, alcohol lowers restraint, anger flares, and violence erupts. It's a lethal combination seen time and again in extreme intimate partner homicides. While people may laugh off jealousy, in individuals predisposed to deep envy, that emotion can trigger a dangerous reaction. When mixed with substance use, the result can be unpredictable and deadly. Expert profiles of relationship violence describe a formula. Low self-esteem and control issues, combined with substance use, create a volatile mix. One common thread: perceived control slipping away, leading to sudden, violent attempts at dominance. Domestic murder is rarely random. It often follows a recognizable blueprint: jealousy, the introduction of alcohol, and an emotional flashpoint. In this case, that spark was a name, repeated at a private moment, for reasons unknown. Survivors of similar events say early signs: emotional possessiveness, frequent checking, verbal threats, should never be ignored. They warn, when a partner reacts violently to words, escape should be immediate. Maria's death reminds us, violent outbursts don't spring from nowhere. They are preceded by emotional pressure, warning signals, and at times, substance abuse. Understanding this chain is critical to prevention. As the case closed, questions remain. Could this have been prevented? What safeguards could have stopped that late-night collapse into violence? For now, Maria is gone, and Fidel is confined, but the community is left searching for answers. Maria Nemeth's life came to an abrupt end in a single act of brutal rage. Her bright future extinguished in the span of a few horrifying minutes. What started as an escape into intimacy turned into a slaughter of unfathomable cruelty. Fidel Lopez confessed feeling haunted after that night. "Each time I close my eyes," he later said, "I have that in mind." Those words echo long past the courtroom echo. Consider this: a loving relationship isn't always what it appears. A whispered name ignited a violence so savage, so visceral, it defied comprehension. Maria's tragic end should shake us, not just as a story, but as a warning. We invite you to reflect: what set this disaster in motion? Could any signs have been recognized before it was too late? Write your thoughts below, and let us know where you're watching from. If this story stayed with you, and if it matters, like this video now. Subscribe to Bruised Voice, and tap the bell so you won't miss our next investigation into crimes that demand attention. Thank you for joining us. Stay alert, stay informed, because awareness can be a first step toward prevention. This has been Bruised Voice. Until the next story, stay safe.